Okay, good morning. Welcome to This Week in Environmental Justice. I'm your host, Tim Cromartie. Joining me is Tamara Raspberry Harris. Today, we have as our guest Jade Stevens, president, and Darryl Lucien, an advisor with the 40 Acre Conservation League, which is a Black-led organization formed to foster greater human connections to nature and to increase support in communities of color for the protection of the environment. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you. Happy to be here.
Very good. Well, I'll just lead off with the first question, then I'll turn it over to you, Tamara. Can you please tell us about the 40 Acre Conservation League? Are you a nonprofit, and what is your mission?
Yeah, I think you gave us a really great intro where the 40 Acre Conservation League is a Black-led nonprofit land conservancy, and we're formed with the goal of fostering greater human connections to nature in order to increase community support for its protection. And our main mission is to eliminate barriers that exist to prevent participation in the outdoor economy by people of color.
As an environmental justice organization, what are your primary objectives for people of color in this space?
Yeah, so, the goal of the 40 Acre Conservation League is, again, to increase that participation of diverse businesses in what we know is a $500 billion segment of the outdoor economy. And so we're looking to find ways to create new opportunities that allow these enterprises to participate in ways that they historically have not been able to. And then also, again, creating an opportunity for more people of color to enjoy the outdoors.
I think to kind of tag on to what Ms. Stevens said, in conversations that we've been having with the legislature, we've really talked about, the disconnect between people of color and having a really deep interest, a vested interest in protection of the environment. The disconnect really primarily lies to the fact that when we talk about, the environment, a lot of what I think people of color feel is that they're just not quite stakeholders in the process. And the question then becomes, well, why do people of color not feel like they're stakeholders? Well, when you talk about environmental protection, I'll give you one example in Los Angeles that it comes very prominently to mind. The neighborhoods of Ladera Heights and I think you'd probably say maybe Baldwin Hills or something of the sort, Ms. Stevens, are in proximity to the Inglewood oil fields. And there's a fair amount of oil drilling that goes on. So when you talk about the Inglewood oil fields and their proximity to the most affluent Black neighborhoods in the country, you will find that at those community meetings, it looks like your average ordinary community meeting of a white community when there's affordable housing going up or something like that. Everybody's out, everybody's participating, nobody wants it. But outside of living in one of the most affluent, again, Black neighborhoods in the country, it's, I think, important to realize that we're not landowners like that. We don't own, most of us don't own any type of share of the great outdoors. We've struggled historically dealing with USDA and, lack of financing and any number of issues. And so, I grew up as a kid in elementary school singing "This land is your land, this land is my land," and that ain't the reality. And that's why, I would say, particularly among Black millennials, we sometimes have some sympathies, right, for climate change and environmental protection, but we're not there because we're not stakeholders. So, like Ms. Stevens said, it's really about reducing barriers to participation. I think when we've talked about participation, we're talking about consumer participation, but we're also talking about economic participation, and how we unpack that.
Yeah, on that note, really
Yeah.
quickly, this might seem like a tangential question, but do you think there's a correlation between the relatively low numbers of Black home ownership and the lack of feeling vested in environmental policy and what's going on in our communities as far as the environment is concerned?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, when you're thinking about home ownership, you're extremely concerned about the area and the communities with which you've invested in, right? So thinking about homeowners who live along the beach coast, right? From Santa Monica to Santa Cruz, they're extremely interested in policies that are being put in place to talk about the rising sea level, right? So they're going to show up and want to discuss things like that. If you do not own a home or own a home, you're thinking about things that may not necessarily impact you in a larger sense. But I think just being a homeowner, it allows you to expose yourself to things that are happening within the environment. And so that disconnect between Black home ownership and being connected with outdoors is something that I think we really need to find a way to address and think about things that we can do to really bring that higher in terms of that rate.
And it sounds like the objective of 40 acres, I mean, within its name, right? The 40 acres has a historical perspective, if you want to talk about that, why that name was chosen to represent this organization.
Yeah, I mean, Darryl hinted at the history when it comes to land ownership, right? You know, there's been a lot of intentions to prevent ownership around people of color, right? When we had the opportunity to seek ownership, there were a lot of barriers from education, not knowing how to manage the land that you own. There's a lot of barriers that prevent you from understanding how to seek additional financing to, again, keep your land. And so, you know, the idea of, you know, the 40 acres and a mule and getting land that was promised to us, it all comes together with that. And so we're really thinking about this new vision, this new future of a 40 acre 2.0, where we are overcoming those historical barriers that prevented us from getting land, and also really seeking, you know, value in that promise of us getting the 40 acres and a mule. And we think that it's possible by doing it through a land conservancy. So it's really rooted in that idea of the promise to us of having land.
Mm-hmm. And what's the purpose of a conservancy? Can you explain what a conservancy is and what its role is, and how government influences a conservancy?
Sure, I'll take that. And so, I mean, I can appreciate it a little bit because as Jade and some of the other board members, as we all sort of had these discussions that I think started casually, Jade being a very outdoorsy person, me being a new convert to the outdoors. I think, you know, in those early discussions, the idea was broached of a land trust. And you know, I'd worked in the legislature, so I had a sense of, all right, there are these land trusts around. There's some prominent ones that were top of mind for me, Silicon Valley Land Trust, and a couple of others that I'd seen kind of from a policy perspective. But basically, you know, when I gave my input, I said, look, I think that the best way to do this is to form a land conservancy. Now, I'm probably one of the few Negroes who has sat on a land conservancy in the past. And so even though, so I've sat on land conservancy in the past. And so as a consequence, it was just really connecting the dots. We're talking about this disconnect between this movement that's prominent, that's multinational, that has billions of dollars of investment in it, and people of color. And so, you know, how do we bridge that gap? Well, you know, we started talking about this notion of land, and the board is full of entrepreneurs. And so effectively, the reason that we arrived at this notion of a land conservancy is because we could see very clearly, and what I'd advised is you got this governor who's serious about climate change, is serious about a lot of these environmental issues. Jade could tell you, we sat briefly through a policy. It was a regulatory hearing where we heard at least the first 30 minutes of it was basically about reparations for the animal kingdom. So there's this deep vested interest.
They want to give reparations to the animals?
That's a whole nother topic.
We're still waiting on ours.
That's a whole nother topic for
FYI.
another episode. But as Jade and I talked about it, it was like, okay, well, we don't need to kick against the pricks, so to speak. This is what the powers that be want to do. How do we meld in protection of the animal kingdom with this idea of really tapping into the outdoors? And so where we arrived is we said, all right, you got to acquire land. Necessarily, all right, if you acquire that land, you got to acquire land for conservation. So why don't you knock these environmental goals out, these wildlife goals out, right? And be contributors to environmental sustainability. But there's a space for this notion of, I believe the Air Resources Board, and you might know this better than me, Mr. Cromartie, talks about working lands, the notion of agriculture, the notion of forests, sustainably harvested forests.
Tamara's the ARP expert.
Yeah. And then, okay, there you go. And then sort of combining that with protection of biodiversity and some of these other things. So effectively, we just said, all right, well, our main interest is Black people, but we can throw animals and sort of ecological protection in that mix. And there's a possibility we can do all three. And so that's how we sort of came at it.
Yeah, when you have to do a fine dance in this environmental space, because as you said, no sense in kicking a brick wall, right? The powers that be are very clear with what their priorities are. How do we not only raise our voices to say, okay, but there needs to be a Black voice as you talk about this process, but also bring others into that discussion and have like a torchbearer on the other side, on the rulemaking side, on the policymaking side, whether it's an elected official or someone from a regulatory agency who says, yes, we need to have this Black voice in this discussion, because just the conversation doesn't include Black people, let alone the text that comes out of this discussion, which goes into a rulemaking or to law. So how do you move that needle forward in saying, can you describe some of the work that you're doing that's claiming, because that's what Environmental Justice League is all about, like, is it good for Black people? Is it good for the environment?
Yeah,
and that's all. We don't have a huge long list of airing of grievances. It's just those two. Is it good for Black people? Is it good for the environment?
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. So I've been primarily advising the board on engaging on the regulatory front. So lobbying and all of that. And I would say, Ms. Stevens, we've done a lot of meetings. I mean, we started last year, late last year. And, we told this, to your point, Ms. Raspberry Harris, we had to figure out, we knew what we wanted to do, but we had to figure out how do we tie this in with what everyone's talking about and how it advances those objectives. And so it took us a little while to kind of put that together in a way that made sense in terms of really being able to articulate it quickly. But effectively, yeah, we've had an opportunity to meet with the governor's office multiple times, with the Secretary of the Natural Resources Agency, Wildlife Conservation Board, Department of Parks and Recreation. I can confirm that Governor Newsom has heard the 40-acre Conservation League more than once.
All right.
And so, we've put in the work. We've made the case. And we're working on, to try and secure, I think, some support from the legislature and from the regulatory agencies. So we've been doing that. And it's really, again, it's built around this notion that you can protect the environment through land conservation, but no different than, the U.S. Forest Service, the National Park Service, or the Department of Parks and Recreation. You can also facilitate recreation and outdoor recreation, right? In those spaces, which may or may not include lodging. It may or may not include, boating, fishing, renewable energy. I just spoke with a couple of folks the other day about a prominent lobbyist who runs his own hunting club, I think that it is, that struck a renewable energy deal on those hunting grounds. And so I think it's about, when it comes to the outdoors, clearly from what we've heard and all the feedback that the board has given us, it's about really sort of melding opportunities for entrepreneurship in the outdoor economy to facilitate a consumer base that is a bit more African-American, potentially taking an interest, and accomplishing these policy objectives in the process. So it's a lot, but I think we've kind of packed it in and found a way to present it in a way that I think has piqued a lot of curiosity.
Can you talk about the Climate Reparations Fund?
The Climate Reparations Fund, what we're proposing is through this fund, we would be able to acquire and conserve a large amount of land that will give the economic benefit and recreational benefit for people of color, but with a strong emphasis on people of color, Black and Brown communities. And so when we're talking about the idea of economic benefit, the funds will be leveraged to really think about ways that we can, to Darryl's point, really touch those two groups from the consumer's perspective and from the economical perspective. So this fund will allow us to go out and conduct research, conduct studies, and also find ways to really conserve the land that we are looking to acquire, and allow us to really utilize this acquired land to explore eco-sensitive options that will allow us to really grow these enterprises that we know, diverse enterprises that we know want to enter the space, and also create this culturally relevant experience for people of color.
It's funny because one of the first conversations we had, and this is not a stated interest, right, of the 40-acre Conservation League, but one of the first conversations that we had it with a staff person in the legislature, and they're like, okay, like, I kind of get it. And I happen to know that this person had a keen interest in sort of the justice element of, I don't know what they call the fourth movement, the whole marijuana thing. And I said, okay, I said, look at it like this. My understanding of the marijuana industry, and I don't have much of an understanding, but you have this retail side. And that's the part that's probably closest to home to Black people. And so when we think about marijuana, we probably overwhelmingly think about retailing. And then maybe if we look a little deeper into it, we think about okay, maybe manufacturing, distribution. All right, so that's another element of it. But I said, you know what? There's probably very few Black people talking about growing, right? Because you need large amounts of land. It's a different wherewithal. Like, okay, you all are fighting to get into the retail space, and I'm not a big marijuana person, but okay, I respect what you're trying to do. But yeah, that agricultural component. So when you think of the 40-acre conservation league and you think of the aspirations to acquire land for conservation, but that enables environmentally appropriate economic activities on that land, such as recreation, that might also include agriculture. So the way I kind of described it to them is I'm like, well, that could potentially be a marijuana grow concessionaire. Now, again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the organization.
See me looking at him.
Yeah. We want 40,000 acres to grow marijuana.
That is not a stated intent.
Right.
But we'll just say fully legal forms of agriculture are an interest, right? And so, it's sort of really this notion about trying to create. When we met with the Ms. Stevens, you were on the call. We met with the director of the Department of State Parks and Recreation.
Yes.
Right. And what did we ask him, Ms. Stevens?
How many of your partners are people of color?
Specifically concessionaires. Right.
And how many?
You mean concessionaires in state parks?
In state parks. Okay. And basically,
and tell us why that's important.
Well, again, when we're talking about, let me put it to you this way. I'm not a wine drinker either, but let me give you another sin example.
Okay. Fun things, not sins.
And you all may have a different experience, mind, but I started to hear Black people like really talk a bit more about Napa when Black vintners kind of began to more prominently take notice. I don't want to say popped up because, again, I don't know if they've been around a long time, but they caught a wave of marketing heft or whatnot. But what is it? Dwayne Wade and a couple of others, they have
so many. Yeah.
And so it started to kind of become a thing, like where, Black people, maybe you had like the real connoisseurs of wine who were always going, but average Tyrone and Sally start talking about Napa, and I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know y'all were like that. All right, more power to you. And so I think part of what we've articulated is we've got these national forests, we've got these national parks, we've got these state parks, many of which are in, they're in the backwoods, hill country areas where we just aren't out there. And frankly, we usually don't want to go out there. After we see that first, Confederate flag and then make America great. Again, I'm not trying to get partisan here. To each his own, but those are triggers, for Black people. So it's like, okay, I got to drive through that or past that to make it to this destination. I'm good. To see what? National Forest? I'm all right.
Right. It's not safe. Some like to go camping. My kids are out in camp right now. I got one kid, like both kids are like in the woods somewhere. But and the response for some people like, oh, you send your kids out in the woods by themselves? Like, no, they're not with the camp. But it's scary because it's the condition that we like to go camping. You have to drive through a rural area, and then all of a sudden you see Confederate flags, you see, White Lives Matter flags or something that you said are very triggering, and then you feel unsafe in a space that's public space that should be for everyone. And when you get there, I'm an outdoors person too. It's very fun. You have a good time, but you're always wondering, if I hire this guy to take us on this trail or to Whitewater Rapids, he's going to lead me down to
where are we going?
Deliverance or something, right?
Deliverance.
We always ask, who's all going to be there? Those are real
who's going to be there? What's on the other side?
Yeah.
Who made the potato salad? Like it's a safety issue for us, but I do know a lot of Black people. I used to be part of the Black Ski Club network. That Black people love to be outside, and we do sport activities. So why isn't there an economic system for us in the outdoor space? I would love to be able to support an outdoor, hiking company or rent jet skis from a Black-owned concierge or not concierge. You know what I'm talking about?
Concessionaire.
Yeah.
Concessionaire. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. But you hit two main points, right? In terms of like, why are we not seeing people like us outdoors? And I think those two things, just to reiterate it, is, safety and cultural relevance, right? There needs to be a sense of safety when groups of people of color are going out into these rural areas and knowing that we'll be able to come back in one piece, right? Outside of seeing these flags, there are plenty of headlines that, show instances where people have been confronted and and being told that they're not welcome, right? Like these are the things that we face on an everyday, scenario. And then cultural relevance, right? Like we know, to Darryl's point, when we see people that look like us, we're going to show up and we're going to support. And so I really think that with 40 Acres, we could be seen as a partner, but also someone that is creating a model and a playbook so that we can work with some of these regulatory agencies to be more inclusive and make sure that everybody feels welcome to show up to places like this. And there's so many partners that are out there, to your point of, a Black ski club or a Black concessionaire. There are peers in the space that exist, right? There's Black Outdoors, there's Afro Outdoors, and a few other organizations that are doing the work, but there's so many barriers again that exist that prevent them from actually being seen and being a part of these parks and locations. And so I think we could be seen as almost a connector to making that possible for others to follow.
Well, I just want to follow up on, Darryl, something you said. What did the director of the state parks, what was their response of the Black concessionaires?
So we'd love to have more Black concessionaires.
Were there any?
I don't know that we necessarily got an answer to that question. But
so he didn't know, or she didn't know.
Right.
Interesting.
I mean,
because if they knew, they probably would have told you.
Right.
I tried to do a little bit of research, and I don't know that my research is correct, but I kind of heard anecdotally that there's like maybe 3 or 4 main concessionaires, sort of that really permeate kind of these outdoor environments. And so I think that, we've talked about our stated vision. We'd like these to be owned by Black enterprises, or we'd like the concessionaires to be Black enterprises, brown enterprises. We'd like them to be diverse. We'd like them to reflect the diversity of the state. So if by chance, I guess the organization acquires land in proximity to, I don't know, King's National Forest, or whatever it's called, National Park, or Sierra National Park, we'll have an ability to almost like throw up the flag to say, hey, Sierra National Park or Sierra National Forest is over here, or El Dorado National Forest is over here, Yosemite is over here. immediately or very, very close in proximity to us. So why don't you come out to our place? And because we've got 1,000 acres, 1,500 acres, 600 acres, 500 acres, wherever. And to Jade's point, it's safe and it's accessible and it's culturally relevant. And we sort of serve potentially as the gateway to say, all right, well, you're here now. Yosemite's right up the way. This is what you should be looking out for. These are some things to see. And so we're in the, we're in sort of the beginning process of reaching out to the national parks and the national forests to just sort of talk about our aspirations. And we still have, obviously a little ways to go, as far as acquiring, that first plot of land, so to speak. But we're well on our way. And so, yeah, I think that's our hope, is that we can sort of be, again, like I said, what some of the Black vintners are to Napa.
Mm-hmm.
We can be kind of the gateway, like the stop.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all right, I'm going to so-and-so, and then, yeah, we'll go into Tahoe National Forest a little bit, or El Dorado National Forest, or Stanislaus, wherever. But then have a really good, outdoor eco experience, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can you share with us the role of the California Wildlife Conservation Board and the role that it plays in reaching some of your objectives?
Sure. Not exclusive to the Wildlife Conservation Board. I'd probably say the Wildlife Conservation Board and then the Department of Conservation. There are two agencies. When people usually talk about the Department of Conservation, I believe their main focus is always their DOGGR. I don't remember what it stands for. Division of Geothermal, some kind of something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's in relation to oil drilling. So when you hear environmental organizations focus on the Department of Conservation, it's really that division that is tasked with sort of the subsurface regulation of subsurface extraction, mineral rights, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Which, okay, we'll get in line behind some of the other environmental organizations in terms of, that whole transition away from fossil fuels. But when we think of the Department of Conservation, we think of it, the actual department and the conservation programs they run. And I guess the quick and skinny is that the Department of Conservation and the Wildlife Conservation Board both disperse, the Wildlife Conservation Board, I believe, much more money, but they both disperse a lot of dollars for the acquisition and or conservation of lands that are already owned by an entity. And they are a major funding source of conservation efforts across the state. The Department of Conservation is primarily focused on, I believe, conservation of farmland and maybe other types of working lands. The Wildlife Conservation Board, although they have a public access component, which is phenomenal, is primarily concerned with the conservation of areas that will create wildlife habitats. And so we've sort of looked and we've done research, and those are sort of the two organizations that really we've already begun to start conversations with. More Wildlife Conservation Board, but we're working our way to the Department of Conservation to, again, start these conversations about the fact that, all right, we've got this Black land entity that has these goals and believes that you can accomplish them all. And what I always leave legislators with is, I said, worst case scenario, if we don't achieve diversity in the outdoors, we still achieve your goals. We still acquired and conserved land. And we'll maintain it and all that good stuff. So I've tried to kind of fine tune it to be basically, there's no reason not to take whatever risk that you think is associated with this organization. There's no reason not to, because the heart of what the dollars are generally for is land conservation. and we'll acquire it, place a conservation easement over it, apply for grants, clean up the vegetation, try and reduce the wildfire risk, undertake some projects that are designed to curate these environments, sensitive habitats where wildlife can thrive. Yeah, worst case scenario, we'll do that.
Right.
The best case scenario, we'll do again what the Black Vintner did for the wineries. We will create a buzz and a draw, and hopefully get organizations like Outdoor Afro and some of the others to say, hey, let's go up there. Let's see what they have. And then let's, if they like it, let's talk about it, and let's sort of spread this through, Black Twitter or whatever, and more broadly. So yeah.
Well, this vision is amazing, and we hope that with this platform, more people are exposed to the work of 40 Acres Conservation League and the work that you all are doing. And I always say, I think Black people, we were we've always been environmentalists and conservationists, right? Like, turn off the lights, don't waste electricity.
Oh,
close the refrigerator, eat all your food. Like that is intrinsic in us. And I think that when we talk about environment, that we change who we're talking about, because often when we say environment, we think crispy, crunchy, Birkenstock wearing, no deodorant wearing, dirty fingernails type of people. And but what we're saying are, no, the four of us on this screen, and the families and the ancestors before us, like, we are environmentalists too. So thank you for joining us. Tim, a closing
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you both for your time this morning. Going back to the topic of your name, I wanted to just highlight for you that there's a blog on EGL's website having to do with historical the promise for 40 acres and a mule, and the systematic things that the federal government did to frustrate and make sure that promise was never achieved. It's a long kind of a documentary type blog, but you feel free to plagiarize and use it for marketing purposes, because I think it fits in well with your organization. There's a lot of symbiosis between the two organizations. So love having you here this morning. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.